If the Egyptians, backed by the Soviets, attacked, they would paralyse Britain's economy. Their leader was Julian Amery.
The prosperity of our people rests really on oil of the Persian Gulf, the rubber and tin of Malaya, and the gold, copper and precious metals of South and Central Africa. As long as we have access to these, as long as we can realize the investments we have there, as long as we can trade with this part of the world, we shall be prosperous. If the communists were to take them over, we would lose the lot. Governments like Colonel Nasser's in Egypt are just as dangerous.
David Stirling was a close friend of Julian Amery's, and together they were determined to find a way to stop Nasser. But Nasser had humiliated Britain once before at Suez, and they knew the British government would do nothing officially to stop him. They had neither the will nor the money. Stirling and Amery had dinner with the Foreign Secretary, Alec Douglas Hume, at White's Club in St James's. They proposed a plan. A group of ex-SAS men would mount an operation to fight the Egyptians, but they would do it privately.
In this particular time, we're talking about in the 60s, the British governments had lost the will, in some ways, to engage in this sort of operation. There was a great need for stability. There was change taking place all around, revolutions, coups, and we could do something which the British government no longer had the will to do, helping to get rid of a foreign power in the Yemen. So it was logical for private enterprise to pick up this particular challenge. And particularly as we felt it was very important for British national interests.
The British government agreed to the idea. Stirling would help to organise a private war in the Yemen, but they wouldn't have to pay for it, and no one would ever know they were involved. But Stirling's team now had to find the money for both men and weapons. In secret, a member of the team flew to Saudi Arabia. Stirling already knew Prince Faisal, the most powerful of the king's sons. Faisal was terrified that Nasser would invade his country next, and agreed to the British idea. The Saudis would pay for the war. The Saudis agreed to pay for the British mercenaries and also to smuggle weapons into the Yemen. The man in charge of the weapons would be a young trader, Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi found the weapons that Stirling's team needed from Britain and America. Hundreds of rifles and machine guns left over from the Second World War.
They were not the type of arms they could get from their usual sources. They needed specialist arms of mountain warfare, guerrilla warfare, and things like that. That, of course, signaled the emergence of Khashoggi as an arms dealer. His first arms deal, Adnan Khashoggi, his first arms deal had to do with the war in Yemen.
The other problem was to find the men. Stirling set about tracking down his old comrades from the SAS, but who had now left the regiment.
He said, you'll be leading a very small party and you will have professional soldiers with you, indicating that I was going to take professional SAS men in with me.
But this was not an SAS operation?
No.
What was it?
It was a international operation, supplying the Arab forces, training them, upsetting the Egyptians by mining their roads, ambushing, general nuisance. Mounted by governments who knew about it, but were not intimately connected at all stages.
So, if things went wrong?
If things went wrong, I'm afraid we would take the rap.
What was invented in the Yemen was a new, private form of foreign policy for Britain, paid for by other countries' money. But then, at the very moment when Stirling's team seemed to be on the brink of success, an economic crisis hit Britain, which threatened his whole concept. In 1964, a new Labour government was elected. Almost immediately, there was a run on the pound.
Mr. Brown, yes. Have you been discussing the economic situation this morning?
We've been discussing the affairs of the nation, yes.
Try the American.
Have you got any money here, John Harvey?
Faced with Labour's promises of increased social spending, the markets panicked and began to pull their money out of Britain.
Sure. Nothing there at the moment.
A lot of the essential economic decisions for a government were taken externally and not inside the country at all.
And who were they taken by, those decisions?
They were taken by investors abroad deciding where to put their money, by bankers abroad deciding where to put their money, and by youngsters like the ones in this room who are speculating, sending billions of dollars across the exchanges every day in search of short-term profit.
The effect of the economic crisis was dramatic. To save the pound, Labour decided on wide-ranging spending cuts. And one of the main targets was defence. Dennis Healey had been made Minister of Defence, and in early 1965 he began a series of enormous cutbacks. He closed the overseas bases and brought the troops who had once protected the Empire back home. It was a deliberate end to the idea that Britain was a great power.
I would really like to make this point very strongly. I don't think it is worthwhile spending a lot of money to try to change the course of history outside Europe or to protect national economic interests in foreign countries. We can't go on being the policeman for the whole world on our own forever.
Healey believed that instead, Britain's defence industries should make money for the country. The Americans were selling weapons throughout the world, and Healey wanted Britain to compete with them and to earn precious foreign currency. He appointed the country's most famous car salesman to advise on how to do this. He was Donald Stokes, head of Leyland Motors.
We're no longer a great world power. We're a commercial trading country now, and the sooner we appreciate this, the better. And unless we get the economy right, unless we get industry prosperous, it's no use politicians doing or thinking anything because they've no power left anymore. We've no power of armies or air forces. The only power we've got left is economic power, and we must deploy this for the benefit of us all to the best advantage to get the best return. We could be so prosperous if only we could get some sense into this.
But Britain was not very successful at selling weapons, until David Stirling decided to get involved. Stirling was furious with Healey's defence cuts. They had come at the very moment when he had finally won the war in the Yemen. In August 1965, Nasser effectively surrendered. He signed a ceasefire with the new king of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal. Nasser promised to begin withdrawing his troops from the Yemen.
We produced a situation where we'd won, where the Egyptians were prepared to pull out completely from the Yemen. They went to see King Faisal in Jeddah and agreed to go. And it was at that time that the new British government announced its intention to leave Arabia. So we'd actually won the game, which was probably why I got so cross. We'd actually won the game. And then it was given away politically because the Labour government was committed to a major defence cut.
Stirling believed that Labour had given away the fruits of his victory. By removing troops from the Middle East, they had left Saudi Arabia defenceless. Above all, with no air force. So Stirling approached King Faisal and offered to create an air force for him, privately. But first Stirling had to find the planes. To do this, he went into partnership with a flamboyant British entrepreneur who lived in Jeddah, Geoffrey Edwards. Edwards went everywhere in a white Rolls-Royce.
I live by exporting, and in many countries the Rolls-Royce is regarded as the highest possible status symbol of someone's achievements. Everyone seems to want to own a Rolls-Royce or at least ride in one. In fact, many of my friends often say to me, the only chance I shall ever get to ride in Rolls-Royce is at my funeral in a hearse. But amongst foreigners, it does have a great effect upon them to be met by a Rolls, saying, oh, this is something, particularly to a chap you've never met before, and you're talking in terms of millions, which we often are doing in my particular game. Or various games, I should say. To be met by Rose means to him, here's a man of substance, this is a man who has something behind him, we can trust him, he's good.